This chapter mentions how whether leading one person or 1,000 people, communication is one of the most important skills that you need to be effective. What helped you, when you look back on your life, to become increasingly more aware of the messages sent with your words and your actions?
Well, to be honest with you, I think I don't know if I really thought about the impact of my words as a teacher, as a coach, until I became a parent and had my own kids and started to think back upon my experiences as a youngster growing up and how important the words were of those people who loved me and who encouraged me, and how much they meant to me, how much they motivated me to want to do better and to be better, and how important it was not just to speak the truth, but to say it in such a way that it could be received positively.
The chapter is a story of when you were coaching at the Boston Garden Championship with Patrick.
Yeah.
And you talked about the 13,000 fans at the Boston Garden were shocked that you were losing the game about halfway through, and you were really upset. You were going to really, quote unquote, give it to the kids.
I certainly was. I was prepared to, yeah.
But then you saw Ringe Jefferson, your first basketball coach.
Right.
What was it like to hear from him that your team might be playing too hard?
Yeah.
Because he stopped you when you were on the way back to the locker room and said, hey, I know you might be upset with the team, but I think they're playing too hard. What was going through your mind at that point?
Well, I tell you what, it was a surreal moment in my life. Not just coaching, but in my life period. And here was a guy that, when I was that little chubby kid called Crisco back on Cambridge, I lived on Howard Street. And the Cambridge Community Center was right down the street from where I lived. And that's where we all went to play every day as kids. And this guy, Ringe Jefferson, who happened to have the same first name as the school I went to, was the teacher, was the coach, the instructor. And he was really good because he didn't just teach us how to play basketball, he taught us how to play life, he was huge into sportsmanship and teamwork. And in fact, the first time I ever got thrown out of the building and suspended for a week was because I was using some not so nice language. And so he was also one of the first people to ever discipline me outside the home. So I loved this guy. Respected this guy, and wanted in my own way to be very much like this guy when I grew up. So here I am coaching. In fact, he tried to also help me get a college scholarship with my best friend Larry Stead, who lived in Cambridge. But anyhow, I'm coaching the high school team. We've got the #1 team in the country. We've got the #1 player in the country. We're supposed to win the state championship. We're supposed to go undefeated. So here we are. We're almost there. We're like 25-0. We're playing in the state semifinals in the Boston Garden, in the place that I worshipped. I loved the Garden, and I used to go to the Celtics games with my brother. So here we are playing in the Boston Garden. The place is full. The magic number was 13,909. There were more than that amount of people in the Garden. And my team is not playing well. In the stands is Red Auerbach. Sitting with Red Auerbach is John Thompson, the coach at Georgetown, who had played with the Celtics. And I'm thinking, man, this is my moment to shine. Everybody will see what a great coach I am and how well coached my team is. We're stinking the joint up. We're losing at halftime. And I was very fiery back then, and, as a coach, and had a lot of energy, and I tell you what, I was steaming. You could see the fire coming through, this bald head of mine. And so we're on our way to the locker room. We're going to go into the locker room that the Celtics had, to have our halftime talk. and I'm fuming, I'm furious. And just before I step into the locker room, this arm reaches out. And I look, and it's Ringe Jefferson, my coach. And he says, "Can I have a word with you?" Of course I said, "Yes." So he says, "Listen, I'll never forget," he says, "be kind. Be kind." He says, "The kids are really, they're trying so hard to win because nothing was going to be acceptable that year except an undefeated state championship team." And he says, and he told me, he says, he thinks they're just trying too hard, so they're making a lot of mistakes. And it was like, it was, God sent Ringe Jefferson to talk to me. And so I said, "Okay, thanks, Ringe." And I walked into the locker room, and my whole demeanor and spirit changed. I took off my jacket, I loosened up my tie, I brought a chair out in front of the blackboard. I didn't write one thing on the blackboard, I don't think. I put one of my feet up on the board, and I looked at the kids, and I smiled. And that, it was like, I think that just froze, shocked them to death, because they were expecting this, they were expecting the devil to come at them. And I said, "No, we didn't come this far to lose. We're the best team. We got the best players. We're the best conditioned. We're prepared to win." All the things that they needed to hear. And I said, "Listen, just relax." And I thought back to when I was a little kid, Ringe was teaching me how to play, and I said, "Listen, remember when you were little, how much fun you had?" I said, "I want you to have that much fun again." And we left the locker room fired up. We went out and we kicked some butt, and we won the game. We ended up going on to win the state championship, cutting down the nets, and it was such an incredible experience. And it's one that there were a couple other times I wish I had Ringe Jefferson to grab me by the arm, and I needed that, and it was quite an experience.
There are lots of moments in this chapter where that's really evident. There are lots of pressure on you as a coach, lots of pressure on your team. One section in particular.
I laugh and I cry at the same time. Oh, jeez. Okay.
Well, the one section that when you were talking about this right now, it runs through my head. The night they turned out the lights. That'd
be a good title. I think they might have had a movie with that title. The night they turned the lights out. Yeah.
So all these stories. What was it like for you to even now talking about it? Back then, writing it in the chapter, to write this section, all these sections, all these stories.
Oh, I'll tell you, Dan. The night they turned the lights out, it was in Philadelphia. I won't go through the whole story, but the bottom line is we played a pretty good game, but we lost at the end. And we were on a roll. We're getting closer to being in position to get a bid to the NCAA tournament. Once again, it was one of those nights where I wish that Ringe Jefferson had stopped me before I went into the locker room at the end of the game, because I went into the locker room probably like I would have done back in high school, and I tore into the guys. I went through every single player, every single mistake we made, on and on and on. And then I even asked my assistants to contribute, and they went on and on and on. And before you know it, it's like we're in this locker room forever. Now we're in Philadelphia. We got to take a bus ride back to D.C. That's a couple hours. The game ended about 10 o'clock. And all of a sudden, you know how you go to a dance or whatever, or at the end of a dance, the person would hit the lights would go out. They would come back on, but they would go out to tell you it's time to leave. The dance is over, the party's over. Well, the custodian finally hit the lights because it was now midnight, and I'm still in the locker room in the opposing team's court talking to my team. Now, if that was at our home court, the lights would have probably stayed on because it was my building. This guy says, I'm getting out of here. This coach is crazy. So he shuts the lights out on me and put them back on so we could get dressed and leave, and we finally left. And I tell you what, I think back to that. I laugh about it now, but those poor kids. I mean, those poor kids, they played as hard as they probably could have, did as good as they could have, but we lost. And, we lost on a half-court, shot at the buzzer. I guess you think you're supposed to win every game, and one of the things I learned from that, and this is a lesson for, I think, everybody, and that is that when you're correcting, when you're communicating, it's following maybe a not so pleasant experience, you should just maybe let it go till the next day. You've had the time to really think about what went on, and then you could talk about it, maybe even construct what you want to say, write down a few key points, keep it short, sweet, and to the point, get it done. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned. I learned a lot of lessons from both of those stories.
This is a great comparison. I really appreciate the honesty and even the level of vulnerability in your writing this section, because the first example at Boston Garden where you were able to shift what you were going to do in the locker room compared to the night they turned out the lights is really refreshing. It's interesting to see how saying the truth tactfully was more effective than in the locker room at Boston Garden versus still telling the truth when the night they turned out the lights, but maybe in a less strategic way. So a lesson that I picked up when reading through this chapter that was really interesting, that hopefully a lot of other students see as well, is that truth with tact, with strategy,
T&T
is effective. Truth without tact can be cruel. It can be more hurtful than helpful. And that was really interesting to see that comparison, and only seeing that comparison because of that vulnerability you have when writing this section. It was a really, really powerful section, I thought. What are your strengths as an interpersonal communicator?
Well, I think one of my strengths is the fact that I can tell the truth. But on the same hand, my weaknesses is that I can tell the truth.
So your strength is also your weakness. Your strength of telling the truth can be a weakness when not using it tactfully.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. It also seems like when you say that strategically, the truth strategically, it's almost doing it from a hard posture, like you mentioned, of wanting to build up the person.
Right.
The other, when using truth,
it can tear them down.
Can really hurt.
It can hurt. And and what you have to do, and what I, tried to do more often than not, but didn't always do, was remember just put myself back into their place. And that's something that we have to do. We have to be able to put ourselves into the picture, into the movie, into the play, into the chapter, and and just remember how we felt. And now I mean that there are times when I remember how great I felt when I was being built up by a coach, being complimented by a coach or by a teacher like Miss Key, or how bad I felt when I was being told the truth, but not in a very positive way, in the best way possible, and how that made me feel and how that made me act and react.
Your strength is also your weakness.
Amen.
What you say is right. How you say it
can't be wrong.
Can't be wrong.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Well, parenting 101, 102, or 103, I think. And I know that consciously I really have tried working on that with my children, probably sometime more than with my players. And I know that I find myself once again trying to do the same thing in a very positive way with my grandchildren. And, and that's what we all should be doing. We should all be trying to build up as much as we can. And the words we use, how we communicate one another, determines whether or not we are successful at that or not.
What can students do today, right now, that would help them become more effective in communicating a message?
They've got to be conscious, I think, of, first of all, they have to have a good vocabulary. They have to have in their vocabulary, in their arsenal, a lot of words that maybe mean the same thing that can be used. So I think they have to have a pretty good vocabulary. Students, like adults, have to measure their words. They have to realize that their words can lift up, can tear down. Their words can be very hurtful, can be harmful, can take the air out of a balloon. They want to put themselves in a position where people want to hear what they have to say, so they have to be careful about what they say. They've got to dwell on the positive, not on the negative, to accentuate the positive. They've got to be willing to listen. My book, Skills for Life, I talk about the fact that you listen with your ears and your eyes, so they have to try to perfect the art of listening, so that they can hear what people are really saying and try to understand what people are saying. And by doing that, they then can prepare themselves to really do something that's incredibly critical, that people like my wife do very well, that you do extremely well, that Pastor Nicholas did well, and that is ask good questions. Because to have a really great conversation and to really have great communication is not only words that have to be shared, but to get the best out of it, there have to be good questions. So you have to open up the floor to the group and be willing to listen to what people have to say, even though you might not want to hear it. And then I think one of the other things that helps is when you put some of those things down in writing. One of the greatest forms of communication is writing letters, something that's hardly done today. I mean, kids are texting every minute. Write a letter. Get a pen, write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, send it to your mom or to your dad or to your best friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever. Some of the best days of communication occurred when I sat down and wrote a letter to a player. Write a letter. Love letters are great because, and these are letters of love, whether it's to tell someone, how to do something better or not, because they can be read over and over again. And also when you write a letter, you're more thoughtful. And if you write the letter and you write something that maybe you would like to get rid of, you can erase it or rewrite the letter. So by the time the letter's given to someone else or mailed to someone else, a lot of thought has been put into it. It becomes almost like a trophy for that person, something that they can, if necessary, reread over and over again. So those are some of the things that I would suggest.